Okay. So before my question, before the conversation start, I just want to say we're gonna have a conversation between myself and Eric, and the next after that we're gonna have Eric take us through a process in his practice. Eric is at his studio right now. Then after Eric taking us through the process, I don't know what Eric is going to be showing us today, but after Eric takes us through a process, we're going to open the conversation for Q&A. So you can keep your questions, and when it's time for Q&A, you can raise your hand and we'll unmute you. Or you can also type in your question, and there's someone behind the scene collating the questions. So thank you very much. So Eric, welcome.
Thank you, Omon. Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure. I haven't done this. This is my first time, so I'm just as excited as everyone else is. So yeah, thank you.
Same here. For me, this is also my first time because I've never hosted an event like this before. So I think this is what also this is the reason I actually started this series. It's like a response to we being at home, whether being isolated by your own decision or because of the pandemic. One reason a lot of us are home, and I feel like using Zoom is a way of continuing those activities that we already are used to. And my activity is hosting conversations. So my first question, because I don't want to really waste time, my first question is, I was reading something you said, right? And you made a reference to as a photographer, the idea of taking control of images. So I want to ask you my first question. How do we as people take control of our images?
I'm curious to know, when you say as a people, are you defining it to a specific group or certain types of people, or generally? Thank you.
No. Paul, so I don't know. We've had this conversation, but my conversations are with Black people, Africans, and those within the intersection, right? So it's very situated specifically. Yeah. So it would be you as Ghanaian, you as Akan, you as a Black artist.
The idea of control is very tricky for me when I think about it. It almost suggests that the control is somewhere else and that it needs to be reclaimed. I think I am more interested in doing to undo. And what I mean by doing to undo is that I'm not necessarily of the opinion that history is fixed and that it cannot be changed. I think if there is fewer narratives coming from Black people, coming from queer people, coming from whichever category of people that we would like to assume here, the way to take control would be simply doing, by putting your work out there, by putting your voice out there. And there's something very interesting I learned not so long ago in thinking about history not being fixed. An example that keeps coming to mind that someone else used some time back was to do with record sales. And because you like music, I thought it would be a very interesting reference. That the idea of an artist suddenly becoming very popular because something happens in the news, or because they do something, because they die, or because something else happened, and their sales, which is something that had happened in the past, or their record or the popularity of it, suddenly has the ability to change in the present moment, and that affects what it was in the past. And I like this idea of history subjecting itself to a certain undoing by doing something in the now. So to answer your question, I think it's by doing. We have to keep putting our voices out there. We have to keep contributing in whichever forms or capacities that we find ourselves.
So does this kind of inform the idea of building an archive?
The idea of
building an archive. Developing.
Oh, building an archive. Could you go a bit into that?
So if we're looking at the things that are created now, moving into the future, and whether be it by death or any form of re-entering, that becomes archival because it's historical, right?
Mm.
So I'm not saying, by way of thinking and knowing that whatever is created now has the ability to be refocused on, right? Does that affect how you think about your work from an archival perspective?
I think photography, by being what it is as a medium, lends itself to this idea of the archive, because you make images and then you build, and then you create folders, and then you name them. This was from here, this was from there, this is from this event, and then you keep on adding to them. So as a medium, I think it lends itself quite easily to this. And I think we've had conversations in the past about this idea of the archive. People have written quite critically about it.
I like the fact that you are using the quotation, because definitely.
Right. But it introduces a lot of there's a lot of things that come in that we don't readily deal with. It's who is building this archive, to what end, for what people or persons is this archive being, accessibility, who gets to access this archive, you know. And it makes me question whether images I have accumulated of my experiences, of my friends and co, that just resides on my laptop or on my hard drive, if that qualifies to be called an archive in
with the conversations we've had on this, indirectly and directly, you know, it's complicated, right? But what I'm saying now is, let's not go too deep into the idea of what an archive is, right? Because that will just take us deep. Right. I am now saying, knowing that there are all of these possibilities, when you create an image,
right?
You as Eric, are you conscious of that? Are you conscious of the idea of developing an archive with every image that you create? Is this something that you are thinking about? Is this something that you do not bother yourself about right now?
To be honest, early on in my work, I think some of the things I was doing just for work. Okay. And I wouldn't necessarily say that I had a conscious or deliberate decision towards building a certain kind of archive or collection. But I think with time, as I continue to grow and develop, I am perhaps more restrained as to what I point my camera to, as to what I want to preserve, as to what I want to make an image of. Okay. I think sometime between 2018 and 2020, which is when I decided to go back to school. I think for a whole year, I must have picked up my camera once or twice. And it was because for the first time, I was thinking about what drives me to pick up the camera and coming to terms with what that position of privilege is and the kinds of responsibilities that come with that. And I don't think I was able to justify some of the images I make and why I make them. I had to take a break Sorry, I think my video is off.
We are here for you. We'll wait. Right?
Oh, you're here for me. Can you see me though?
No, I can't see you. Yeah, better.
Okay. Sorry about that.
No problem.
So I am very deliberate about how I go about making images, because I think holding a camera and pointing it at a place or at a thing, you exclude more than you include. Actually, you have like an almost 360 field of view, and you choose to zoom in on a very specific aspect of that place and exclude all of these other things. And I am very cautious about what drives that framing. I'm not sure if I've answered your question.
I think to a point, because for me, I'm very concerned and curious about imaging, storytelling, creating a narrative, and I feel like creators or artists, like photographers or even filmmakers, like once you fall in the position of capturing something, that position is it's a very sensitive position, because when you start looking at our history, largely that the distorted part of it were created by people who were in a position but telling their own distorted idea of what the reality is, right? So there's a statement that you said photographs die and are reincarnated, because it's very connected to the first two conversations we just had now. So can you speak more to that statement?
I think if I remember correctly, when I made that statement, I was thinking more in terms of memes, actually, how popular memes had become all of a sudden. And I don't know the history about memes, like how they have been in the past and how they've come to where they are now. But it was very interesting for me that an image that was made for a very specific purpose or intent could be completely emptied out and new meanings like filled into it. So I find it very interesting. And I think it's perhaps also indirectly influenced how I'm thinking about the kind of work that I am doing now. And when I say the kind of work I'm doing now, I think my practice has shifted slightly. For those who may not know, I'm coming from a more social documentary background. And it wasn't until I started engaging with photographers like Nia Budai, who were
yeah. Oh, by the way,
oh, Nia is on. Well, hey. Well, Ni, since you're here, it wasn't until I started working or understudying photographers like Nia Budai that my ideas about social documentary began to shift. I think for the first time with photography, or like with the history of photography in Ghana, as I had come to meet it at the time, he is one of the photographers who were working very much with what one would consider the documentary photography language, but also completely turning it on its head. And so here is someone who is constantly speaking about the landscape, talking about the landscape and its histories. But the images that he was making were far from literal. They were images that would just point to things. And I find that kind of poetry very interesting. But not just that, it was also the beginning of my experience with photographic chemistry, which has become the focus of my practice now, chemistry.
Yeah.
And the kinds of possibilities that photographic chemistry offers beyond the documentary as we know it, beyond documentary images that only tell us something about what's inside the frame, to documentary images that tell us about how those things inside the frame come to being. And this has been my biggest takeaway in terms of my practice, learning some of these things, trying to make sense of them. And so now, even though I still borrow heavily from social documentary practice or the form or grammar of it, I have very much moved away from social documentary images that can be readily read as this is this person, this is this situation, this is that phenomenon, and looking for other ways to allow for those conditions, those situations themselves to be able to actively write about themselves. And I think that's something that photographic chemistry or analog photography offers that digital photography does not. And it's not to pit the two against each other, because I'm very much from the two schools. But I do acknowledge that fundamentally, they are two different mediums. Digital photography and analog photography are two different things. Now, I'm not sure what the question was again when we started. I hope it's something.
It doesn't really matter, because it's still a conversation, and I feel like you just actually transitioned us into the next phase of this event. I don't know. Would you like to show us? I still have more questions, but would you like to show us the studio and go into the main event for the day? Because I know that you are willing to show us a process of yours.
Oh, today I'll simply show you how to develop black and white film, which is very, very basic. I think when we come to photography, and this is one thing that I've been aware of recently, and going back to your first question, which spoke about taking control of our stories. I think for people who are self-trained or who train themselves at the very beginning of their practice, the references that you see are usually references from photographers in Europe or in America. And we are only at that beginning point very interested in how sharp the images are, how beautiful, what cameras they're using, how beautiful the composition are. These are things that we concern ourselves with. But we forget that photography is a language, and like many languages, they have very specific ways in which they are used or in which they are put together in different places. And so picking the language of a Brazilian photographer might not necessarily translate to how we deal with images here. And again, Nia Budai, not to throw more gas, but I think it's something I appreciate about how Nia Budai works, how deliberate he is about visual literacy and getting to the very particularities of how we understand language here and how that translates to photography.
Okay.
So for this, okay.
Okay. Just before you continue, everyone, hi. Can you hear us? Just okay. Good. All right, great. So Eric, yes, over to you. Still.
So I think I'm supposed to be showing you.
You can just show us first of all your beautiful studio first. You know, just
okay. I thought my beautiful
just
self.
kind of through your beautiful studio. Maybe also show us one or two cameras or whatever, if you have them named, or just something nice, or maybe you have a tripod that you've been using for 6 years or whatever, like, so that it can be fun also while we're talking
Yeah.
into the technicalities of
Right.
being a
Right.
photographer and artist.
For the longest time, I was just using one camera, which is the very first camera I bought. It was a Canon 60D.
Yeah.
But now, thanks to my skills in stealing and in asking for things, I have a few more cameras. This one is a Polaroid
Yeah.
that I use sometimes. It's a Polaroid 600. And it's an analog camera. I think it was given to me by Molly. So hi Molly. Thank you, Molly. This is a Super 8 camera. I recently got into making analog moving images, and Super 8 is quite easy to develop and quite easy to access relatively. So a friend of mine, Jason Nikoanan from Signatures, gave me this Super 8 camera. This is a regular 35mm film camera that I own. Hello. This one is like an old 1936 Kodak Volander from Bernard Coy Jackson that I use.
You have nice friends, too.
Charlie, it's really good. Medium format gives me like incredible like big negatives, relatively big negatives that I'm able to work with.
Oh, nice.
This is also a 35mm camera that I use, also analog from Selassie. This is 35mm from Nia Bodai. And this is the only camera I own. When I say I own that, I bought with my own money. This is the Fujifilm X3, XT30 or something. I don't know, Charlie. But it gets the work done. It's really good for documenting my work and that kind of stuff. This is also a Super 8 camera that I use.
I'm curious, Eric.
Yes.
If you were to also give me one, like if you were to pass one to me, which one would you give to me?
Let's see. Maybe I can give you this one.
At least we're all here. We are like 34 now. You are my witness. You know, Eric just promised me a camera. Please, a week from now, you guys should reach out to me and ask me if Eric has given.
That one is Ojoro.
Max, stop being a bully. You said if he was supposed to give you one, not which one is he giving you.
Right.
All right.
If
Eric, I see you have some people supporting you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are good people.
Charlie, don't give him that camera. Don't give him a paper camera instead. Because if you give Black one camera, you need to give me a camera.
I have a pinhole camera. This is my Matchbox pinhole, so I could give him this.
Oh.
I think this will make great images.
Awesome.
All right. Okay. So let's go back. Eric.
Yes.
So we can continue now with you showing us the process.
Right. Currently, I have been interested in. Well, I have been very interested in the weather. I will go ahead and try to develop one black and white film as we continue to speak.
You said you've been interested in the weather. Can you?
I've been interested in the weather and in the weather conditions and specific chemical processes that allow the image to be altered by the weather. And so I started off with cyanotypes because they are very sensitive to little changes in the weather condition. And beyond that, you are able to get images that are not just, say, a portrait of Eric, but are also able to register where the image is being made, what kind of conditions the image is being made under. And I think it's something that I find very interesting in terms of thinking around documentary practice or documentary images, that we are not looking at just the content of the image, which can be very ambiguous if you think about it. depending on cultural context or place or who is looking at it at what time. But here you have images that also tell of their own making. And I think that is a step forward in thinking around the possibilities of the documentary.
So as you're thinking about weather, is the environment also part of it, like plants, like material form?
Very much so. Well, all of these processes have been explored in the past, but I started working with a process from the 1800s called the antotype, which is basically working with the photosensitivity of plant petals or certain plant leaves. And as I began to work with those, again, still thinking about documentary photography, thinking about what it means for an image to be one, I couldn't help but think that these are images that are very much of the land. These are very much images that speak to where they are coming from, and that if you're to even pick a plant of the same species from a different place and you're to make an image with that, you would be getting something completely different. And I think it's a kind of specificity that I am interested in getting at, and not to be a purist in any sense, but I think I am very interested in this idea of documenting whole, you know. So it's not just the content or the information inside of the frame that is telling you that this image is from here, but also what the image is made of itself. It should be able to point to you, even if it's hypothetically that the image is coming from this place or the image is coming from that place. And so I think that has been one of the drives to exploring the photosensitivity of plants and photographic chemistry in general.
Eric,
so
let me cut you. Let's go into the process that you have for us.
Right. Okay. So today I will be developing one black and white medium format film. To my photographers in the house, I'm sure they all know this. This is Ilford HP5. And it's a medium format. When I say medium format, I'll show you what that means. The sensors of most of the cameras that we work with now, the digital cameras, most of them are 35 millimeter. What it means is that if you pick a film like this one here, the sensor size is equal or approximately should be equal to one of these frames. I don't know if it's clear.
Yes.
But one of these frames, yes, one of these frames should be equal to the sensor size. Now, this medium format, the sensor size is this big. So if you put them side by side, you see
the difference.
This is quite big. This is really small. They are different formats. They give you different kinds of information. You move on to things like large format, blah, 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 and then it goes on. You have different kinds of formats that you can make images with. So in terms of film.
In terms of the image that we're about to go through, can you tell us where the image is from?
This is just a film I shot, sorry. I keep switching between the front and the back camera, so I get confused. This is just a film I shot. So it's just a roll of film that I'm about to develop. It's really nothing fancy. We may not even be able to see it because I will not be able to scan it now.
Okay, no problem.
Mm-hmm. So developing black and white film is really simple, and I think everyone should get into it. All you need is a changing bag like this one. You need a changing bag like this one, and then you need a tank. This is called a developing tank. So you don't even need a dark room to be able to do this. You just need this tank. And this tank is light sealed. So it means that light is not able to get into it.
Yeah.
And inside it, you have these things. They are kind of a spool inside the film. Sorry, inside the tank that you roll the film around in the bag, in the dark. You open the film in the dark, and then you roll it around this spool. Then you fix it back into this tank. Then you seal it close, and then you cover it up. And then you're ready to take it to wherever you want to develop it and have it developed in under 30 minutes. It's a really fast process. I know we all buy our cameras from elsewhere, so this shouldn't be easy to access. So I'll just go straight ahead into it, but we can still talk as I'm working on it. And I have to switch again. Right, so this is the bag. It opens from the bottom this way. There is a zip. I'm not sure if you can see it. So it opens this way. So I will pick my film. I'll put it inside.
Yeah.
And then I'll pick my my tank, the cover, put it inside. Pick the spool, put it inside the rest of the tank, and then cover. Then I zip it up, and then I seal it. So it's light, tight now.
Yeah.
And if my hand goes into it, immediately my hand goes into it, and I open the film, my hands cannot come out. I remember the first time trying to develop film at Neo Budai's house. Trying to spool one of these medium format films. And then I started sweating. Immediately your hand goes into the bag.
Yeah.
All parts of your body that has never itched you before starts to itch. And you cannot scratch because your hands are trapped.
So when you have a guest in your studio, they can help you scratch.
You need nice guests in your studio.
Okay, all right.
That's important. So as my hand is inside now, I will unwrap the film. Usually the film is taped to a black paper of sorts to keep it light sealed. So you have to separate it from the paper to get the film. And once you're done, you can start to spool the film and then keep it in the tank. Black and white film is also temperature sensitive.
Okay.
You usually develop black and white film around 18 degrees. So you have to make sure that your chemistry is around 18 degrees. And to maintain the temperature, you sometimes put ice inside the tank, not inside the tank that the film is in, but in a separate bowl that the tank can sit inside. So the temperature is maintained over the development period.
It's quite a very sensitive process.
It is. But when you start to look at the other processes that I'm talking about, the cyanotypes and the very earlier photographic processes, they are also sensitive, but to a different kind of to different kinds of conditions. And maybe in a way, film like this is too sensitive that it does not allow me to talk about those things I want to talk about with documentary images.
Yeah. But I'm curious, do you normally do this around this time, or do you do this in the night?
I do it during the day. Sometimes I do it at night, depending on what I feel like doing, to be honest. I think I still am interested in developing film in this kind of way because the process is very meditative.
Yeah, it does feel like.
And then there is the uncertainty. You have made an image, but you're not sure what would come out till you have actually developed it, and any slight change in the chemistry, in the environment, in temperature could perpetually alter the image. And
yeah,
I think that uncertainty I gravitate towards. I'm not such a big fan of polished images.
yeah,
So this is very much in my domain.
yeah. So music, right? I know you have a love for music. So in processes like this, would you say music comes in handy?
Yeah, music always carries you through. It's like soft landing, you know. The day carries you through the work. The interesting thing about music is that I cannot make one, or I cannot sing one, so it makes me appreciate it very much.
Yeah.
But I like what music does. Like in times where you don't know what to say or don't have the right words, music surfaces. When you want to feel a certain type of way, music can take you there. It's music is just music. There's nothing with it.
Wait, before you open anything, can you just tell those who just came in what you just done, the process we just went through?
So today I am just developing black and white film. It's a very simple process. So I have a changing bag, which means that you don't need a dark room to be able to develop black and white film. You can develop it in your kitchen, in your bathroom, on your bed. You can develop it anywhere you find outside. So all you need is a tank, your film, and a means to load it in the bag, and then you're ready to make some chemicals and have your image developed. So what I just did was spool the film and keep it in the tank. So I can open the tank now this way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's no light that goes inside. And so now I'm ready to develop it.
All right.
So I just developed in my kitchen. My studio is actually a garage. So I have my chemistry in the fridge. I will try to crop my camera this way so you can.
I will not see the wache or red or
I just finished the wache. Everything was inside. Okay. Okay. So I have I don't know if it's clear.
Yeah, we can see you. Okay. We can see Eric, right? We can see the tank, guys. Yes, we can see you.
I already have kept my my developer in the fridge to bring the temperature down to 20 degrees. So I will still check again to see if it's actually 20 degrees. So for black and white, you need just 3 chemicals. You need the developer, and then you need a stop bath, which will stop the action of the developer. The developer is what brings out the image. So if you shoot analog film, you take your camera out and then you make an image. That image is not permanent. It's like a shadow thing on the film.
Yeah.
So you have to develop it for the image to come out. Okay. And then you have to use the stop bath to stop the action of the developer. Otherwise, it keeps on developing and you have like a film.
So just out of curiosity, for those who are about to embark on this, maybe those even in Accra, where do you get your materials from?
Charlie, Amazon, same place we buy all of our cameras for. I'm sure every photographer buys their camera from somewhere.
I mean, so your cameras, your tank, your chemicals, like if you can just go through the process of acquiring your materials.
Yes, so with film, I buy film from Tudu in Accra. So you can get a 35 millimeter film very easily from Todo.
Yeah.
But with the developing chemicals, you may have to order them from elsewhere, from the US or from the UK. And to be honest, as photographers, we rarely buy our cameras from here. We have to order our cameras and all of those things anyway.
Okay.
And the good thing is, lots of these chemicals come in bulk, so you can have 5 liters of developer, and you could potentially use that for over a year or so. And so it's not like every month you have to develop, you have to buy a new set of chemicals. No, you don't really. You could buy bulk and you can use it over extended periods of time, even to over a year or two. So that's what I do. This black and white chemical has been here for almost 2 years and it still works. I still use it. So I'll just quickly check the temperature of the chemical. I think it's down to about, okay, it's still going down.
So what are we looking for?
20 degrees.
Okay.
So the interesting thing is, because our room temperature, even today, that's not super hot. Room temperature is around 29 degrees. So water that's coming from my tap would be anywhere around 29 degrees or more. So you can imagine on a hot day how warm our waters are. Whereas if one wants to develop color film, for instance, the temperature one needs is around 38 to 40 degrees. And so that favors us here. And by us here, I mean us in the tropics. It means you just pour water from your tap and it's already 31, 32 degrees. And all you have to do is just warm it up a little bit and you're ready to go. So I have a temperature of 21 degrees, which I think I can work with. So I'll just go ahead. And usually what I would do, this is not compulsory, but I would usually just warm up the film a bit. Ideally, you should do it with water that's almost the same temperature as the one you're about to develop with, but heck, Charlie, let's see what comes out of it.
Not all the time to follow rules, eh?
Charlie. I'll just do it. We will get an image. We'll get an image. So I think we can continue if you have any other questions or if there's
I do. I've been thinking about how how projects that we embark on affect our practice eventually, right? So
right.
I was thinking, I remember that you documented the women in Gabaga.
Right.
So my question is, how did that entire process affect you, and how is it continuously affecting you, if it is?
Right. Just a second, please. I'll quickly get a timer. Hi, sorry, I'm back. So documenting the old ladies of Gambaga was my very first entry point into the social documentary already or with social documentary as a practice. The ways in how to cover work or issues I'm thinking about it now.
Yeah. Take your time.
I returned twice back to Gambaga, but refused to make images and refused to continue the project. There is something about being a spokesperson that I think requires or comes with a lot of responsibility, and I wasn't sure if that was a responsibility I wanted to take on.
Okay. I did. If you notice, when I asked the question, I did not make any specification. I just said Gambaga women. I know that there were some, additional characteristics to that project, but I personally just see them as those women, older women that you documented. That's how I would love to see them. And if you can just touch on why you decided not to document.
Right. It was a good experience in that it was the first time it was maybe the first documentary project I did. And so it gave me an experience as to how to move in the field, how to engage, how to speak with people. I did definitely benefit from that experience in that way. And then there is the question of who the work is for, who is going to see the work, and why I was doing it, that I was unable to get proper answers for. And I think without answers, I wasn't sure that I should be in a position to continue, or without proper justification. So here's the thing. There is a camp of women who are being accused as witches and who have been chased out of their communities for the most part, and are finding a kind of haven, which is not really a haven also. And we go as social documentary photographers and we point cameras in their face and we make images. And the point is to show to the world that this is happening. And I think it's a necessary practice, it's a necessary component. But as to who has to do it and how properly they can do it, I'm not really sure. And I think I have gotten to the point where I am not just doing it because it's work, but that it has to have some kind of consequence outside of that.
Okay.
I think to answer your question, I am not sure. I'm not so sure. And I think it's why I have been actively in the past 2 years looking for alternatives to what it means to document, or like what it means to even think about social documentary practice, and what other possibilities could we even come up with that can not do away with it, but question it, and maybe from those kinds of questions derive new modes or new processes even.
Yeah.
I'm not sure yet, but maybe you have something to contribute.
That's it. It just speaks to the idea of movement, and you know that I'm very, very, very interested in the idea of movement, and I feel like when you get to that point where you have to think or pause, I feel like those moments are very essential to who we become,
Mm-hmm.
because it gives you time to reflect and to answer or find new questions or find answers to pending questions. We have 2 questions here. I'm going to open it out up for Q&A now, so that as we wait through the process of making a photograph, I'm going to open the Q&A. So I have 2 questions already here. One is linked to something we spoke on already, but the first one says, can the components of the chemicals be bought here to create the finished ready to use chemical?
If this is in connection to black and white photography, the chemicals I'm using, you would have to import them. But there are alternatives. You can, for instance, develop with coffee and vitamin C. If you don't really care about polished images, that's an alternative. The plants and the food and the vegetables that we eat, sorry, they are all loaded with what we call phenols, which in themselves have developing properties that can be harnessed. And so your regular wine, even your urine, can be used to develop film if you want to try. So there are alternatives to these chemicals that I use. But if this is the specific chemicals that you want, you would have to import them.
Yeah, I think that was him just trying to see if there are individual chemicals that you can get and mix to create the compound that you are using. But I think
you can also, yeah, you can.
Romeo,
it's a more tedious process, but you can get the individual components and mix them, and in some instances even substitute them with things that you can find here.
All right. So Romeo also just asked, he said, "Hi Eric, I love to think what is left outside of the photograph speaks to the image. So is it like an image speaks across void? As a photographer, do you often think of the space beyond the image and how it influences your work?"
I think I would love for you to repeat the question.
All right. I love to think that what is left outside of a photograph speaks to the image. So it's like an image speaks across void. As a photographer, do you often think of the space beyond the image and how it influences your work?
I think it's exactly what I'm doing now. I'm thinking of how the landscape itself can, in a way, write about itself. How the weather, how the dust, how the sun, how the humidity levels can all become components of what gets read as the image, and not something that we can necessarily see as a person or as a bottle or as a thing as the image. And so going back to social documentary practice and thinking about what else can be documented and how else we can go about that documentation, that's where I am now.
Yeah.
Thinking about the means through which the image comes to being, becoming the image or becoming a part of the image.
This is what I call knocking the brain. The space of thinking and rethinking, learning and unlearning, because it's like it's a continuous journey. Patricia Donko, he mentioned that he purchases the camera overseas. Are there no companies in J that specifically sell such cameras? See, Charlie, Eric, before you answer this one, I just feel like this thing is about exchange rate. This is supposed to be very, very easy. Like he can buy a camera for, let's say, $200 on Amazon. That camera, if a company here in Ghana imports that camera, they'll sell it for 500. By the time they put it, they'll sell it for 5,000 cedis.
Charlie, yeah, Charlie. Oh, that one there, it happens. If you go to do, Charlie, simple things, because someone has paid for ship, it will be costing 20 times the price. So If you usually have someone traveling down, and I will usually ask my friends or anyone I know who knows someone, if they know someone traveling down. My dear friend Billy also helps me with that. She's constantly carrying things for me. So shout out to Billy.
And shout out to me too. I carried some things for you too.
Aman, I cannot remember, please.
I see. I see. Next time I get that phone call. All right. Do we have any other questions? You can raise your hand. Okay. Betty, Paul, Guela, and Brenda. I'm unmuting you now.
Sorry, black and white development time is around 14 minutes. So I would have to change the chemistry when it's 14 minutes. I'm having a hard time keeping track of the timer.
Yeah, Betty, you can ask a question.
Okay, I have a question for cyanotypes. I wanted to know how the archive...
Wait, can you hear them, Eric?
No, please.
Your volume is low.
One second.
And before you ask your question, can you just tell us where you're speaking from?
So I am from France, but we are based in Berlin, in Germany.
Okay, good.
So my question was about cyanotypes. I wanted to know how Eric does archive the cyanotypes so that they don't get damaged with time, because they are still very sensitive. So how do you keep them?
Thank you very much.
So I have almost no interest in making sure that they stay the same. And to actually make sure that they don't stay the same, I work with papers that are not archival. So for the projects I developed on paper, I worked with paper that I would buy from the roadside ordinary stationery shops, which are not special papers. So it means they are not really buffered. So they may either have their acidic or alkaline content shifting to one side, meaning that if you make images with them, the images are very unstable. I develop with rain and tap water, which are loaded with nitrogens and magnesiums and other minerals, which also destabilize the image itself. And then in displaying the works, I do not keep glass over them, so they are further more exposed to the very set of conditions that makes the images appear. And so you have images that change, images that darken, that shift colors. Even with where I dry the images after developing them, I have these straw mats which have a red and yellow pigment, and when the wet cyanotype papers go onto them, some of the pigments or the paper absorbs the paper absorbs some of the pigments from the plant themselves, and so that also goes into the image. And this is all in making sure that the image is very specific, but the image is also not stable, and the image can change and become other things, or even eventually fade or disappear. So I have no interest in making the image permanent in that way.
Yeah, thank you very much. So let's make our question. I'm going to start unmuting those raising their hands, but let's make our question like very succinct, direct. Let's know where you're calling from also. Speaking from, sorry. Essay, I just unmuted you now.
Wrote my question. So I was just asking if, Eric, do you take notes of the various effects of the weather? For example, are you able to say, okay, when it's 18 degrees, that's the result, 20, the result? Like, do you keep track? And are you able to tell what are the various variations? It's just for you personally. And my second question,
let's say one question.
Okay.
Okay.
I keep comprehensive notes on every specific condition that makes the image appear. So I have a notebook with, even though the information I'm getting is from is from simulations, because these weather apps are designed to just be simulations. And even with the information they give, there can be changes. But I try to follow up at the very specific times where the images are being made. I record all the specific conditions. So I record the humidity levels, the UV index, the kind of water I'm using, where the water is coming from, the paper I'm using. I do acid tests to ascertain what kind of paper it is. If I'm working on glass, also make very, very specific records. So all of these things are noted down. So the image is also all of those things that are not seen, or all of those conditions that one may not know about.
Okay, thank you. Yao, I'm unmuting you now. Let's know where you're speaking from.
I'm speaking from my hammock up on the mountains. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, my question is like in relation to the very first question that was posed, and Eric, you mentioned that you do to undo, and you feel like, well, and I may be misrepresenting what you said, but you mentioned that you feel like all artists, or what people have to do is to just as in do the work to create any changes that they would want to make. But I was thinking, like, I mean, when we think of like even the process of doing, because we also have to think about like access. For example, even to get a camera, to buy a camera for you to do like the work that you want to do is something that is even, or to make like sharp, you know, vivid images is something that not everybody like has access to. So already from the get-go, there are like hurdles, and some people are just like historically set back. So I was just thinking if you could like just revisit the statement of like doing to undo, and with this in mind, how then does it relate with us?
Thank you, Yao.
Thanks. I think that was a very simplified, it was maybe an oversimplified answer, doing to undo. But I do acknowledge that access is not the same across. And while I acknowledge that, I also acknowledge the innovation that comes with working with what is around you, and the possibilities of new things coming out that everyone has to learn to deal with. And this is something very popular that my lecturer, Dr. Karikaja Said, speaks about a lot. Using the things around you to develop work, and developing work and thinking about it in a way that we all have to come back and learn. The person that has a camera has to come back and relearn what this image is. Like, none of us are privileged in that sense. And I think if we can also begin to look at it from that angle, something interesting could potentially come out. Because now you don't necessarily have to work with a 60D or with a camera that you're importing. You could make a matchbox pinhole camera and make images out of it. Or you can use your own urine to develop your film. And the images that would come out of that would be images that cannot come out from any other condition. And that is also worth considering. I think that's the answer I have. I do acknowledge the hurdles. I do acknowledge that we have to compete against all of these other things and gaps and such.
But there are still possibilities, and we also cannot deny those possibilities.
That are what
not
yet.
The next question, Atu.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Atu.
Afternoon.
Hi, Uncle.
Yes. Yeah, Eric. Thank you so much for sharing your process with us, and Omo, thank you for facilitating. It's been a long time.
It's been.
But Eric, my question is, don't worry, we'll catch up. my question is, Eric, you seem to be very interested in the process that leads to the making of the image. Can you please comment on that for us? Why that interest? Because I know other people will just take the photograph and then leave the development of the image to a studio or people who specialize in that. Why your specific interest in the process as well?
Right. Thank you, Uncle Abdul. There's a number of reasons I'm very interested in the processes or like the chemical processes related to photography, because I think it's one of the ways to properly link photography to politics in a way that is not just symbolic, but is tangible, in a way that we can see. For instance, I started developing glass plates with rainwater, and it got me thinking about Obuasi, where I grew up. I was telling a friend the other day that when I was growing up, my stepfather had a very specific skin condition. He had black spots all over his body, and all the other members of his family seemed to have this black spot over their body. Now I can pick up a camera and go to Obuasi and make a photograph of my stepfather as a living embodiment of the place where he's coming from. In his explanation, there was a very specific gas or fumes that were released from the mines close to where they grew up that caused the kind of skin condition that he has. If I make a photograph of that, that is merely symbolic. Right? But photographic chemistry has the ability to literally make the image that I would produce from such a place not just evidence or proof, but materially, the image that could come out would be as a result of the conditions of that place. And so I think of even perhaps collecting rainwater from Obuasi. Rainwater from Obuasi or from a very specific part of Obuasi would have very, very specific components. If you're looking at trace elements that that would come as part of the rain, as part of the mining activities and so on, you'll be getting a very specific kind of image that if you make the image in Accra, in Adenta, or in Pantine, you wouldn't get. And I'm very interested in how these processes can lead to images in themselves that cannot be obtained otherwise.
Which goes back to the connection with the weather you were talking about.
Right. But it's just the process has a way. If you're going to outrightly make an image, you have an idea what you can get.
Yeah.
An idea loosely, but if you're going through process and if you're allowing the place and its materials and its land to influence what image that you get, one, you do not know, and I like that the uncertainty excites me, but also I like that the results from that are not just symbolic, they are literal material traces of the conditions that are present in the place that the image is being made. And I think it's one of the things that really fascinates me about process is the uncertainty that.
Wait.
I was on mute. I was muted. I do not know what would come out of it. I cannot anticipate the results in advance. And because I also don't like to be bored, I like how all of the uncertainties and contingencies come to play to form an image that is beyond the control of the one who is making the image, or that can be beyond the control of the one making the image.
Okay. So if you have questions, I think so. If you have questions, you can raise your hand, or you can also just type it. We'll get to it. Patricia.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, hi. I'm Patricia, and I'm from Mainz, Germany. My question goes to Eric. My question is more about the end product. Eric, when you send in some of your works outside of Ghana, do you specifically focus whether these images have some positive image, or do you really sometimes also decide to take out certain images because maybe they might reproduce stereotypical images or ideologies Western countries have of other African countries?
Thank you, Patricia.
Yeah,
thank you. I think I try to do that in the making of the images themselves. Once the images are made, especially with street photographs, it's hard to restrain how they are read. You know, all of those things are very place and culture specific. So I think one has to do the work of being aware of
before
language and how it's read. Omon, I'm sorry, I did not hear you.
I think you even already answered this by when you said you decided not to continue the Gambaga project.
Oh, right.
Like being conscious of what is in front of you before taking the photograph, knowing exactly what the photograph is and being conscious of the image the photograph might have.
Right. Sorry, it's my chicken.
We have Romeo, so I'm going to unmute him.
Hi, Romeo.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Romeo.
Hi. I wanted to ask, because I've been writing more about your work, especially as you know, I do quest studies, and I'm more interested in erasure and how erasure has been recreated. And one thing I noticed about your work, which is also a similarity with Rotimi Fani Kayode, although on a different plane, is that there's a need to like rewrite a certain kind of subversiveness into your photographs, whether it is joy, representation, or even absence. And it's something I'm always very curious about, of how present you are in the moment when those images have been taken. And I know you spoke about space as being the weather and rain and all these other things. But I'm also thinking about space literally, like a room, for example, which in one of your photographs I find very fascinating, of two men and a baby just being in a space, and how that space, even being public with the camera, becomes private and invites us into a certain kind of joy, affirmation, and a certain kind of celebration of life. And I'm always thinking of how present you are in writing those things, in photographing those things. I'm sorry, I'm always talking about writing.
Thank you, Romeo.
I'm thinking about this. So I think it's worth saying that I am in a kind of a transitory stage in my practice where I'm not moving necessarily away from documentary. I'm looking for other means of documenting, or what other possibilities are there to say extend as a means of extending documentary practice. I made those images, and I'm guessing you're referring to Just Like Us because of the image you described. I made those photographs at a time that I felt that those kinds of imagery were necessary or urgent even. Your question is around being present. As I was making that project, or as I was developing the photographs from Just Like Us, I knew immediately that I did not want to put anyone in a box or to define what queer experience or what the queer experience in Ghana would be, because I am coming from a very specific set of conditions, which makes that queerness just one aspect and doesn't necessarily equate me on the same level to any other queer person that I would point my camera at, for instance. And so a strategy I used, the project was initially supposed to be for just 2 weeks. It was just like something I had planned to do just for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, but I extended it to a year. And in that year, I lived with almost every one of those people in the photographs, sometimes for a few days, sometimes for a few months. And so the images that I ended up, first of all, the process was very chill and relaxed. I wasn't constantly holding my camera. I would whip out my camera every now and then and make a photograph of a moment. And I think I was interested in that everyday situation or everyday phenomenon. An example of someone just brushing their teeth, or someone just reading a book, or going for a hospital appointment, or going to the market to buy food stuff. I think I was interested in those kinds of moments and events because they expanded the work beyond the subject matter that took me into it, which was documenting queer people. I even included people and friends who did not necessarily identify, quote unquote, as such to complicate things further. I had to be present because I had to look into the very boring, mundane activities to be able to make something meaningful out of. That's my answer.
So you see, there's something about photographers, right? And
right.
I feel like sometimes it's a very intrusive art form or practice, you know, because
a certain kind, a certain kind.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying some photographers. It becomes
a certain kind of photography.
Yes, my question is coming. My question is coming. My question is coming. So you can answer. So it's like the people who practice in a way that is so intrusive. It's like they only care about the image that they are about to capture. They don't care about the people, they don't care about the environment, they don't care about anything. It's just about the image. But knowing you and being around you, I see that you do not move in that light. So if you can speak to that, like at what point, yeah.
Go on, please.
Yeah, at what point did it dawn on you, or has it always been a trait of yours to be careful, to be mindful, to be sensitive, to be aware?
I am thinking about this, and again, neo-Buddhist practice comes to mind. I think Ni's practice is something I always try to go back to when I have the chance. And as you speak of mindfulness, it makes me think of how not being so literal can also, in some cases, even be more profound. And this is something that Neo-Buddhist does. I think it's also about being human and about wanting for others what you would want for yourself. I think I'll be very uncomfortable if people come to me and start immediately pointing a camera in my face. Cameras can be very aggressive.
Yeah.
You know, like immediately a camera gets pointed at you, you start arranging yourself. You start figuring out how to be. If your face is right. Yeah, you become very aware, and it's not necessarily the best feeling. So I think one also has to give room for connection, for rapport, to be able to know when to make an image. And I think Akimbi, who is a phenomenal photographer, he keeps talking about listening before making an image. And I don't know, I think that's something that we can think about. The idea of listening with everything before one makes an image, I think is very important. I think listening almost goes with care, or can go with care.
Yeah.
So I like that idea.
Yeah. So you just showed me a film.
This is the film we developed. So this is the finished product. It took 14 minutes to develop the film, and then there was 1 minute of stopping the action of the developer, and then 5 minutes of fixing the film in between conversations. So this is what we have. A medium format film like this takes just about 12 frames. You can only make 12 images. And I think it's also the thing that makes me enjoy analog photography, is that you are limited. You are limited with the number of frames that you can make for any roll of film that you pick. And so it makes you more mindful. It makes you more deliberate, and it makes you pay more attention. At least for me, I don't know about other people, but I think this medium has the tendency to come with those kinds of qualities. You have to wait. You are not clicking like 1,000 away to go back to select a few images to use. You know, everything has to count.
Yeah.
And so I like working with those kinds of limitations. And also just the uncertainty. You know, these images have been made, but something could have fallen in the developer and it would shift the color or the content of the image in a way. And I still love the idea of images developing out of the actions of chemistry. It's still quite magical in a way that I appreciate. Yeah.
Is it possible to get an image when we post this conversation?
Definitely, yes.
Okay, so I would invite Patricia again. Your hand is still up, so I guess you have another question. I'll invite Patricia.
Hi, Patricia.
Sorry, I forgot to put my hands down. I actually don't have a question. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay. So let me.
I have a question about music and photography and how you connect the two, whether formally or in any way. Like, how do you connect music and photography?
Okay, so this is you asking me a question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for me, I feel like it's all storytelling, right? So that's how I enter film, photography, or music. It's all about storytelling. It's all about building a perspective, whether it be still or motion or sound. So that's how I enter. What does it do for me? Is it inviting me to add to it or not? Every time I look at an image or go back to a film or listen to music, what am I learning? Am I learning something new, or am I reaffirming what I know? I feel like every form, even writing, all these forms are all connected, right? And also you also see layers, right? With music, you today you can hear the voice, the vocal so clean, and you hear certain vocals that maybe you didn't hear before in terms of backup vocals. But then you can listen to the same music again, and you pick up a flute that was not visible, and maybe because of the environment you find yourself or place you are mentally, you can pick up that sound. I think there's the same thing for images. Like you I feel like there is this image that I have of my mother, right? Can you see it? And
Yes.
it's an image that I always go back to because I was there. But I have a series of images from this event that every time I look at this image, it takes me back to that moment in a way like an out of body experience, right? Yeah. So for me, I see images and music almost as the same thing because it's just really about storytelling. And this is the reason why for me it's important to identify who is telling the story, for who is the story being told to, and I feel like for us it's very important for it to be Black, for it to be African, and those within the intersection. We need to tell our story and first of all tell our story for ourselves. Now, as a creative, your whatever you create might end up in Japan, might end up in Germany, might end up in Amsterdam or anywhere, can end up in Senegal, can end up in South Africa or Kenya. But it's always important that when you're creating, you know your audience. If the audience is Accra, Ghana, you know that this is the first audience I'm creating this for, and then every other person can come into it. I feel like, yeah. I don't know if I answered your question still.
No, thank you for sharing, Omon. I think I appreciate your answer.
Yeah. You have another question for me?
Well, I will be eating from your house, so
yeah, you're invited. You're invited to dinner. You're invited to dinner. As we are, for all of us, for those curious, myself and Eric, we live not too far from each other, but we have identified each other as quarantine partners. So we are isolated, but then when we need to share space with another person, we can invite each other from our isolation. So, anybody, any other question? Does anyone have any question, or should we just continue? Okay, so Eric,
how do you unwind, Omon?
Me?
Yeah, like how do you unwind? Like we've been talking about work, but we all know that we are not always working. Like, how do you, when you're low, how do you push yourself up?
I hardly stay in a low place because I believe that the human emotion is a decision. So there are different things happening that affects you as a person, right? But I feel like to go into a state of into a low state and stay there is also a decision. And for me, I try not to attach myself to those things that take me into depression,
Mm.
right? Because I feel like it's not a choice, you know, because it happens to you, right? But for me, over the time, as someone who has gone through a form of, would I say, sadness or a form of longing, I hold on to the things that bring brightness to me, right? So I identify those little things, right? So I love music, right? I love water hitting my feet. I love movies. I love listening to people having conversations, and I love having conversations with people. So my practice is literally the things I love. So it's really hard for me to say, oh, I'm working, right? But because these are the things that excite me. When I'm sitting by myself, I'm thinking about the next conversation I'm going to have, right? Those are exciting things for me. I love cooking, right? Like you said, you're coming to have dinner. I woke up this morning. Yeah, I woke up this morning and I made a big pot of soup. That's how I felt, right? Not because we wanted to eat a big like soup in the morning, but I felt like cooking, like because it's also very therapeutic for me. So I've identified all of these exciting, happy points in my life. So whenever I feel like there is sadness or low points coming, I find the nearest, what will I call it now? The nearest inspiration for happiness or sweetness.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Yeah. So what about you? As we're rounding up, what about you? How do you keep yourself inspired when you are not?
Oh, okay. This one is slightly different from what I asked you.
Yeah, but it's a remix.
In terms of unwinding, music is always soft landing. I love music. I like all kinds of music. I grew up listening to a lot of reggae because of my uncle, and zouk, surprisingly, and some high life. But as I began to grow up, I would put my nose in any kind of rhythm that would spark something inside of me. So I listen to music across, like I listen to a lot of music. Music is a part of my, it's a part of my life, just as photography is. I cannot go without listening to music. And I like to move. I like to be in different places. I like to hear different people. It could just be in my backyard or at the next junction, but I like to pause and listen to people talk, listen to people be.
So it's very similar between me and you then.
Yeah.
I love writing. I love writing.
Like water. I do write, but I like water too.
Yeah.
I like water a lot. So whether being in one or watching one, it's always that's something really good for me.
It is.
And I like food, but I don't think I eat as much, and I don't think I like to cook as much. I hate chopping vegetables. I think it's annoying.
And I love chopping vegetables because for me it's therapeutic because the process for me, when I say I love cooking, it's to the point where I love the process of preparing a meal, right? I do not love eating the way I love cooking. So for me, the entire process of making the meal, I love to cook for people to eat and hear what they feel about what I've made. I think it's the same thing with my practice. For me, I feel like there's so much to my practice is really just interacting with this society, with space, with people, with myself, and it's a continuous thing. I want to say we are now talking into personal areas, and I feel like this has been a successful and enjoyable conversation. Eric, I hope you enjoyed it.
It's up. I did. I just wanted to say that I like to cook, just not edible stuff.
Eric, and you also like tomatoes too much.
Wow. Was that a read? Are you reading me?
Hey.
I do like tomatoes too much. Thank you. Thanks for letting the world know that I like tomatoes.
But I want to ask a question. Would you, since you don't like to chop things, do you chop tomatoes?
I do chop my tomatoes, yes. Thank you.
All right. So I just want to say thanks everybody for coming. I don't know. How do we end this, Eric? Do you want everyone to, do we unmute people and just hear everybody?
Yes. There are people I haven't heard from in a long time, thanks to Miss Rona. So
all right.
I'd love to get some shout outs. Well, there's Billy.
So before we sign up, guys, let's all unmute ourselves.
Hi, everyone.
Hi. Oh, what's up? Hey, there's Mauli, there's Drew.
Hello.
What's good, everybody? What's good?
Thank you.
Bye.
This was really bye.
Thank you so much.
Really, this was awesome.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. I have Felix in the background, but thank you both. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Omon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey,
oh,
bye. Bye. Everybody, bye.
Bye.
One by one. Bye.
Hey, bye.
Bye. Bye. Tobo. Notama. Bye. Good to see you. Hey, Musa.
Hey, bye. Omo, bye.
Oh, bye.
Hey, Kabna Ajare. What's up?
Bye.
Hey, Musa Yusuf, what's up?
Hi, guys. So we listen to this during bath time.
Hey, bye.
What's up? Oh my God.
It's the good.
Wait, there's Ayodeji. Hi, what's up? Someone says you can't say bye. Wow. Omon, thanks a lot. Oh, it's me, Ajwa. Hey, hi, Ajwa.
We still have two people. There are still two persons here. Kwabena is here. Kwabena,
you're not talking. What are you here for? Kwabena, what are you here for? Why are you not talking? Ayodeji, you're not talking. You people are here, you're not talking. What's up? Come on, please. Are you making food? Are we still recording? Are you making food?
We're still recording and we can still stop.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
I'm making dinner. You come for dinner.
All right.
All right. Good seeing you too, Toby. You can remove yourself from the video because that's the process. Not you, Eric.
Should I leave?
Yeah, you can leave too.
Bye, Billy.
Bye, Billy.
Bye.
Hey,
Kabna is not talking, but Kabna is here. I cannot hear Kabna. Kabna, I want to hear from
Kabna, should we remove you from...
His video is on mute.
Yeah, I've sent him the mute. I've asked them to unmute themselves. You know what, Eric, this was like an amazing conversation, and I would not say I learned so much because a lot of this we spoke about wait now. A lot of the things we spoke about. This is years and years of conversations, right? And but I can see how interesting it was for our audience because it's really comforting to hear from those creating another side, their minds, how we take this journey as practitioners. Yeah. So I want to say thank you for accepting this invite.
No, thank you for having me, Omar. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
This is the first of its kind I've done.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I was a little bit nervous because I think I am kind of between practice at the moment. I'm kind of in a transitioning kind of stage in my practice, and I was very nervous about talking about things prematurely. But I think we found a good balance between what I've been doing up until this point and what's to come. And it wasn't necessarily giving out things prematurely, but just talking about things and around things. And I really like that. I really appreciate. I think it was more fruitful that way. So thank you for asking me. As usual, I appreciate it, but I will take your thank you in food.
Yeah. Come for dinner. We've already said that already. All right, bye, Eric. Bye-bye.